Baobab blooms, a symbol of something beautiful emerging after seasons of hardship. Story summary. Set in the vibrant heartlands of East Africa, this story follows Abeni, a deeply spiritual and kind woman whose life is scarred by betrayal, loss, and the weight of family expectations. She once believed love was a distant dream. Meanwhile, Jabari, a gentle and principled man, quietly admires her from afar, never pushing, only offering friendship. Tragedy after tragedy hardens Abeni's heart, until one day, the winds shift and healing begins. Through faith, tradition, and resilience, their friendship blossoms into love, but not without sacrifice. They never cross boundaries before marriage, and their respect for one another's dignity becomes the foundation of a bond built to last. Chapter 1. Beneath the Baobab Tree. The sun had just begun to sink behind the golden hills of Njoro village, casting long shadows beneath the ancient baobab that stood watch over the savannah. Its thick trunk was cracked with age, its limbs like open arms reaching to the heavens. Children said it whispered the secrets of old lovers, of promises lost and found again. Abeni sat beneath its shade, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. Her skin glowed with a warm hue kissed by the sun, but her eyes carried the weight of years. She had once been a girl of laughter, full of energy and curiosity. But time and tragedy had carved silence into her soul. She had lost her mother to illness when she was just a teenager. Her father, once a respected village healer, had withered from grief and wandered off into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Left with an uncle who saw her more as a burden than family, Abeni learned early that silence was safer than truth, and self-reliance better than hope. That day beneath the baobab, she wasn't alone. From the distance came a voice, calm, grounded, unmistakably familiar. "You still come here when you need to think," said Jabari, approaching slowly. Abeni didn't turn, but her lips twitched faintly at the corner. "Some trees speak more truth than people," she said quietly. Jabari chuckled. "That's why I prefer trees too." Jabari had lived in the same village his whole life. He had seen Abeni grow into the woman she was, strong, private, guarded. He never imposed himself, just lingered on the edges of her world, offering company when words failed her. "Will you sit?" she asked, patting the ground. He settled beside her without hesitation, their shoulders barely brushing. For a long time, they said nothing. Only the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass and the occasional songbird filled the silence. But it was a shared quiet, not an empty one. Finally, Abeni asked, "Why do you still come when I push everyone else away?" Jabari didn't look at her. "Because I don't need you to be anyone other than who you are. And because you never truly pushed me away, not really." She didn't respond, but the tightness in her jaw softened. For the first time in many months, she let herself believe that perhaps she wasn't as alone as she thought. And the baobab, old and wise, stood silent witness. Chapter 2. The Shadows of the Past. Later that week, the clouds rolled in from the east, dark and swollen with memory. Abeni walked the edge of the market square, where the shouts of vendors, the smells of ground spices, and the laughter of neighbors were dulled by her internal storm. She had received a letter, one she'd hidden in her dress pocket. It was from McKenna, the woman her ex-fiancé had left her for. Years ago, Abeni had trusted a man named Simba, a charming trader with promises sweeter than mango nectar. They planned a life together, shared secrets under moonlit skies, and even looked at homes in the next village. Then, without warning, he vanished. A week later, word came he had married someone else. Abeni didn't cry. Not then. Not even now. But something inside her had collapsed and never stood quite straight again. And now, McKenna's words clawed at old wounds. "He told me you never loved him the way he needed. I thought you should know that. Forgive me if you can." Abeni crumpled the letter in her hand. She didn't cry. But she trembled. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. "Come. Steady. Your hands are shaking," Jabari said gently, standing beside her as she pretended to browse woven baskets. "I'm fine," she lied. "You don't have to be." She closed her eyes for a moment, holding her breath as if the wind would blow her pain away. But it didn't. And still, Jabari stood there. "I'm tired, Jabari," she whispered. "I know. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again." "I won't ask you to," he replied. "I'll just be here. No promises. No pressure. Just me." She turned to him, really looking at him for the first time in weeks, and for just a breath, the pain softened. Maybe faith didn't always look like loud prayers and songs. Maybe, sometimes, it looked like someone who simply never left. Chapter 3, Cracks in the Wall. The rainy season had begun. Fat droplets danced on the rooftops of Njoro village, tapping a rhythm of renewal. But inside Abeni's small clay-walled home, it was silence that reigned. She sat curled in the corner, eyes following the slow crawl of water down the window's edge. Jabari hadn't visited since the day in the market. Not because he was angry, no, Jabari wasn't the kind to hold grudges. But Abeni hadn't invited him. She hadn't spoken to him. She hadn't even met his eyes when they crossed paths at the well. And now, she missed him. She had built a wall around her heart, carefully, brick by emotional brick, after Simba left. But Jabari had always knocked gently, never forcing his way in. Now, with his absence, she realized the wall didn't protect her anymore, it only imprisoned her. There was a knock at the door. Abeni hesitated. Then opened it. To her surprise, it wasn't Jabari. It was Kioni, her childhood friend, soaked in the rain with her baby tied on her back. "I couldn't think of anywhere else to go," Kioni said, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Abeni moved aside, ushering her in quickly. They dried off, wrapped in old woven blankets, and sat on the floor as the baby gurgled between them. "Is he still beating you?" Abeni asked gently. Kioni nodded. Abeni's jaw tightened. "You're not going back." "I don't have another option." "Yes, you do," Abeni said, surprising even herself. That night, as the storm raged outside, Abeni fed them both with what little food she had. She tucked the baby beside her own mat, and when everyone had fallen asleep, she sat quietly, staring into the flickering flame of her lantern. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. Maybe it was about choosing to become someone stronger because of it. Maybe Jabari saw that in her before she ever did. Chapter 4, A Visit and a Voice. The rain had eased the next morning, leaving behind the scent of earth and renewal. Smoke curled gently from the thatched roofs as villagers cooked their morning meal. Inside Abeni's home, the warmth of shared silence still lingered. Kioni was still asleep, the baby's tiny breaths nestled against her shoulder. Abeni stepped outside to fetch water from the well, head wrapped, her bare feet splashing in the damp soil. And there, leaning casually against the side of the well, was Jabari. He straightened as he saw her. "I was coming to check on you." Abeni hesitated. Then smiled, just slightly. "I didn't know if I wanted to be checked on." "I figured I'd come anyway," he said. They stood quietly, letting the moment fill in the space that absence had carved. He watched her draw the bucket from the well and take a long breath before speaking. "Kioni came last night," she finally said. "With her child." Jabari nodded slowly. "I heard from Mama Ayo. I didn't know what to do. But I kept thinking about what you said. About being here. About not leaving. You listened." She turned, lifting the water jug onto her head with practiced grace. "I did." He smiled, walking beside her as she returned toward her home. "I used to think I needed fixing," she said. "That something in me was broken, that I wasn't good enough. But maybe I'm just healing. One quiet step at a time." "You never needed fixing, Abeni," he said gently. "Only space to bloom." As they reached her door, she paused, then added, "Would you like to come for tea?" Jabari didn't answer right away. He simply smiled, not the kind of smile that rushed in, but the kind that waited to be welcomed. I'd be honored. And so, for the first time, Abeni let him in, not into her house, but into the space she had long closed off inside herself. Chapter 5: The Promise of Patience. The sun was high when Jabari left Abeni's home, but something had shifted, not just in the sky, but in her spirit. Later that afternoon, Abeni sat weaving a mat beneath the Baobab tree. She walked slowly, thoughtfully, her fingers looping reeds with care. Each strand was part of a pattern she hadn't seen until now. Life didn't rush. It unfolded. She thought of how Jabari had listened, not once offering solutions, just silence where she could think, space where she could breathe. Kioni's voice broke the quiet. "You trust him?" Abeni looked up. Her friend had returned from gathering firewood, the baby tied to her back again. She sat beside Abeni, studying her closely. "I don't know what I trust yet," Abeni admitted. "But you smile when he comes near." Abeni said nothing. Instead, she plucked a new reed and began to weave it into the mat. "I've made mistakes, Kioni. I've trusted the wrong ones before." "Maybe," Kioni said. "Or maybe your heart just knew you were meant for more than being someone's second thought." Abeni paused. That truth hit somewhere deep. That evening, as the village gathered around the fire pit for storytelling and song, Abeni took a spot near the outer edge of the circle. Jabari arrived later, but he didn't sit beside her. He simply nodded, then took his place across the fire. It wasn't distance. It was understanding. They met eyes across the flame, and for the first time, Abeni didn't look away. She let herself feel it, not the rush of desire, but the slow awakening of something safer, deeper. Love that grows not from need, but from choice. Chapter 6: A Quiet Offer. The embers of the fire still glowed long after the stories had ended. Children had been carried home on sleepy shoulders, the elders retreated with whispers of old lessons, and the circle slowly thinned, until only Abeni and Jabari remained, seated in the hush of crackling ash. Neither moved. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that had grown roots. They didn't need words to fill the night. But eventually, Jabari cleared his throat. "I'll be traveling to Layando Hills in the morning," he said. Abeni turned her head slightly. "For what?" "To deliver supplies to the clinic. Mama Ayo's medicine. Some seed stock. The rains hit that village hard." Abeni nodded. "I've heard. The harvest nearly failed." He hesitated. Then softly, "Would you come with me?" She blinked. Not out of shock, but because she had not expected to be invited into anything beyond her village in so long. "It's a 2-day walk," he added quickly. "We'd stop at Muto's homestead on the way. Safe places. Honest people." Abeni didn't answer immediately. But she saw it in his eyes. It wasn't a romantic gesture. He wasn't trying to win her affection. It was something else. An invitation into his world. To see who he really was, away from the village, from expectations. Away from watchful eyes. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll come." Jabari smiled gently. "We leave at dawn." As he walked away into the night, Abeni stood beneath the sky, stars blinking overhead like promises not yet spoken. For the first time in many years, she looked forward to morning. Chapter 7: The Journey Begins. The morning mist wrapped the village in a cool hush, as if even the earth was holding its breath. Abeni adjusted the strap of her woven basket, now filled with dried beans, ointments, and small bundles wrapped in banana leaves. Jabari walked a few paces ahead, his stride sure, but never too fast. He glanced over his shoulder every so often to make sure she was keeping pace. She always was. They passed fields thick with dew, where goats bleated softly and birds chased the dawn. The trail wound upward through narrow hills, lined with tall grasses swaying like dancers. Despite the weight of their supplies, there was a lightness in the air, a kind of quiet knowing that something new was beginning. By midday, they stopped beneath a msasa tree, its branches spread like welcoming arms. Jabari pulled out roasted cassava wrapped in banana leaves and passed one to Abeni. She took it. "Thank you," she said, brushing back a curl from her face. They ate in silence. Abeni noticed how Jabari closed his eyes with every bite, savoring not just the food but the stillness. "You like quiet moments," she said. "They tell the truth better than noise does." She smiled. "Did you always want to stay in the village?" she asked. Jabari took a sip from his water flask. "No. I left once. Went far. Tried to forget this place, tried to forget who I was." "What brought you back?" "My mother's dying wish." He said it without flinching. "I'm sorry." He shrugged gently. "It was a gift. Losing her reminded me of who I wanted to be. And where I belonged." They continued walking after their meal, following a winding path that turned golden under the late sun. Abeni hadn't walked this far in years, but her feet didn't ache. Not in the way they had when she was running from something. Now she was walking towards something. Or perhaps someone. Chapter 8: Shelter at Muto's farm. The sun was melting into the horizon, turning the grasslands gold, when Abeni and Jabari finally reached the modest homestead of Uncle Muto. Smoke curled lazily from the kitchen hut, and the smell of roasted maize drifted across the fields. A worn dog barked once from under the porch before lazily lying back down. The place was quiet, but alive, in the way homes are when they've been loved for years. Uncle Muto was sitting on a stool outside the house, sharpening a blade. His back was still straight despite his years, and a wide grin stretched beneath his graying beard as Jabari approached. "You're late," he said without looking up. Jabari smiled. "Your sandal must be faster than the stars." Uncle Muto stood and embraced him, then turned to Abeni. His eyes, still sharp as a hawk's, scanned her, not in judgment, but in curiosity. "This is Abeni," Jabari said softly. Abeni bowed slightly. "Good evening, sir." Muto grunted. "No, sir, here. Just Muto." "Come, you're welcome. The land remembers kindness, then so do I." They were led inside to a warm room lit by oil lamps. Wooden mats lined the floor, and dried herbs hung from the ceiling. Muto's wife, Mama Nyesha, served them a bowl of hot millet and fish stew without many words, her eyes smiling more than her lips did. That night, Abeni lay awake on her sleeping mat, wrapped in a woven blanket. The walls of the farmhouse creaked softly as the wind stirred outside. From the next room, she could hear Jabari's quiet breathing. It was the first time they had ever slept under the same roof. Yet not once did she feel unsafe. Not once did she worry about his intentions. Respect. That's what he gave her. Trust, she realized, was not something someone asked for, it was something they built, little by little, step by step, like the journey they were now on together. In the hush of that night, under a thatched roof far from the weight of the past, Abeni whispered a silent thought to the stars. Maybe love can grow from stillness. Chapter 9: The Village of Layando. The road to Layando stretched long and dry the next morning, but it was softened by Muto's hearty breakfast and Mama Nyasha's quiet blessing, "May peace travel with you both." By midday, the green clay paths of the highlands gave way to red dust and scattered rock, and eventually the small village came into view, nestled in a gentle basin, its round huts and lean fields surrounded by low hills like guarding arms. But something was wrong. A group of villagers gathered outside the small health hut, murmuring with concern. A woman sat cradling a limp child, her eyes wide with silent panic. Others leaned on sticks or wiped their brows in exhaustion. There was no joy in Layando today. Jabari quickened his pace. "This doesn't look good." Abeni's steps matched his. "Go," she said. "See what you can do. I'll find the women. I'll help." Inside the hut, Jabari unpacked the medicine, speaking calmly to the village elder and nurse, explaining dosages and boiling methods. The clinic was nearly bare, the rain and poor harvest had kept help away for weeks. Outside, Abeni met a woman with tired eyes named Nima, who explained what happened. The river overflowed. It brought water, but also sickness. Children fell ill. A few older ones too. We've used everything we have. Abeni nodded. Let me help. I know herbs, not as many as a healer, but enough. She walked beside Nima and the other women through the heat of the day, grinding bitter roots and boiling mango leaves. They cleaned water pots, rinsed fevered clothes, and sang quiet lullabies to children wrapped in cloth hammocks. By sunset, the village felt different. The air was still heavy, but no longer desperate. Hope had crept in, quietly, humbly, and it showed in the way the mothers smiled, even faintly, as they stirred pots or watched the clinic door. That night, Abeni and Jabari sat side by side beneath a tree just beyond the huts. They didn't speak. Their silence was no longer the silence of pain or distance, it was the silence of two souls learning to breathe together. I saw you today, Jabari said finally. You didn't hesitate. Neither did you. He smiled, then paused. You know, if I ever do ask for your heart one day, it will be because you offered it freely. Not because I waited long enough, or said the right words. Abeni looked up at the stars. And if I give it, she whispered, it will be because it's no longer broken. Chapter 10, When the Storm Comes. The wind shifted on the third night. It came fast as a whisper, a rustle through the banana trees beyond the hills. Then came the scent of wet earth rising too soon, followed by silence, a deep, pressing quiet that made the night animals go still. By midnight, the storm broke. Sheets of rain slammed against the rooftops of Lyando, ripping palm branches from their posts and flooding the footpaths. Lightning flashed, thunder bellowed, and then the clinic roof began to leak. Abeni and Jabari were already awake. He held a lantern as she covered the children with thicker cloths, moving between mats to calm them. Nima scrambled to push baskets beneath the dripping roof. Waters rising near the riverbank, one man shouted as he burst through the door, soaked and breathless. We need to get the goats to higher ground. Abeni turned to Jabari. Go help. I'll stay here. Their eyes locked for a moment, one heartbeat too long. She didn't want him to leave. But she also knew he had to. He nodded. I'll come back for you. I promise. Outside, the wind howled like grief. Inside, Abeni kept her hands steady, singing under her breath to the shivering child she held, her voice trembling with each note. Then she heard it, a crack like the sky itself splitting, and the far wall of the clinic shook. The thatched roof sagged at one end. Abeni cried out, everyone outside. Now. In the torrent, she carried the smallest child on her back, leading the others with a firm grip and an iron will. Nima followed behind, arms around two crying toddlers. They ran toward the elevated church platform, the only structure built with stone. And then, suddenly, Jabari was there. He threw off his wet tunic and took the baby from Abeni's back. You kept your promise, she gasped. Always, he said. They stood together on the stone floor, watching the wind lash across the valley, soaked but safe. The villagers huddled together, clutching children and neighbors alike. In that fragile shelter, Abeni looked at Jabari. Mud streaked his face, his chest rising and falling fast, but in his eyes, calm. And she knew. This was the man who would walk with her through every storm. Not just this one, but the storms to come. Of life. Of grief. Of the unknown. And she didn't fear anymore. Chapter 11, The First Bloom. The storm passed before dawn. What remained was a world washed clean, the scent of rain-soaked clay, the shine of leaves newly rinsed by heaven, and the quiet hush of relief that settled over Lyando like a prayer. Children picked out from beneath blankets. Goats cried from distant pens. And slowly, like the petals of a flower in the warmth of morning, life began to move again. Abeni stood at the edge of the shelter, looking out across the village. The fields shimmered with dew. Puddles dotted the ground like silver coins scattered by the sky. Behind her, Jabari approached, his footsteps soft. The roofs will need mending, she said. I already spoke to the elders. The village will come together by midday. will help them rebuild. She turned to him, brushing a lock of hair from her brow. You slept. A little. But I kept thinking about you in that store. I kept thinking about you, she said softly. They stood in silence for a moment, the morning breeze dancing between them. Jabari stepped closer. Abeni. I don't want to rush your healing. I never have. I know. But I want you to know that if love is something you're ready to grow, I'm willing to tend it. Day by day. With my hands. With my life. Not just when things are easy. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out something small, a dried hibiscus flower. My mother used to tell me, she said, that when the hibiscus blooms after a storm, it means something beautiful has survived. She pressed it into his hand. I'm ready, Jabari. He smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet gratitude. They did not embrace. They did not kiss. But they stood there, two souls finally free, standing in the light of what had survived. And in that moment, it was enough. Chapter 12, Return to Njoro. The path home felt different. Not just because the road was clearer after the rain, or because the sky was now painted with streaks of light instead of thunderclouds, but because Abeni and Jabari walked beside each other with a new kind of peace. A quiet agreement. A beginning. When they arrived at the edge of Njoro, the Baobab tree was waiting. It stood just as they left it, timeless, steady. A silent witness to every goodbye and every return. Children ran ahead, calling Abeni's name. Kioni stood near her hut, the baby on her hip, waving with a grin so wide it nearly broke Abeni's heart. Mama Aya was already at her doorstep, clapping her hands and laughing. You brought him back, didn't you? She called to Abeni. But Abeni just smiled. Maybe he brought me back. That night, the village gathered for a feast. Not because a holiday demanded it, but because joy, when it returns, deserves celebration. The air filled with the scent of roasted yam, coconut stew, and mango wine. Music pulsed from carved drums, and laughter rippled across the firelight. As the stars settled overhead, Jabari stood beside Abeni beneath the baobab once more. I'll speak to your uncle tomorrow, he said gently. I'll ask the right way. Abeni looked at him, her face soft. And what if he says no? Then I'll wait, Jabari replied. But I won't stop asking. She didn't respond with words, only with a small nod and a look that said more than speech ever could. They didn't live together after that. They didn't share a hut or a bed. But they shared everything else, laughter, harvests, responsibilities, and silent walks through the fields. And when the time came, and her uncle gave his blessing, the entire village gathered once more, not for mourning or healing this time, but for promise. Abeni and Jabari were married beneath the baobab tree. And just before the ceremony ended, the wind stirred gently, and a single red hibiscus petal drifted down between them, as if the heavens themselves whispered, what was once broken has bloomed. Moral of the story. True love isn't found in grand gestures or perfect beginnings, it is built in patience, respect, and resilience. When hearts heal and grow together through life's storms, love can bloom stronger than before, like the baobab that flowers only after enduring the harshest seasons. Copyright 2025 David Keaton. All rights reserved.